It was supposed to be a normal day at a high-end car dealership. Shiny luxury cars, well-dressed salespeople, and customers looking to make expensive purchases. But no one expected what happened when a mysterious man walked through the doors. Dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, he didn't exactly fit the image of a typical high roller. The staff barely paid him any attention, assuming he was just another window shopper wasting their time. But little did they know, they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. As he wandered around, admiring the sleek vehicles, a sharp voice cut through the air. The dealership manager, a man in a crisp suit and a confident smirk, approached him with a look of impatience. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone laced with condescension. But before the man could even respond, the manager's expression shifted to annoyance. "Sir, if you're not planning to buy, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't have time for people just looking around." The room grew tense. Other employees turned to watch, some whispering under their breath. A few customers glanced over, sensing the brewing confrontation. But instead of reacting with anger or frustration, the man simply looked at the manager, calm and composed. There was something about his presence, an unshakable confidence that made people uneasy. That's when one of the younger employees gasped, his eyes widening in recognition. He nudged his coworker and whispered, "Do you know who that is?" But before he could get an answer, the manager scoffed. "I don't care who he is," he said dismissively. "If he's not here to buy, he needs to go." The man finally spoke, his voice steady but firm. "Are you sure about that?" What happened next left everyone in the dealership completely speechless. And by the time they realized their mistake, it was already too late. The dealership fell silent. The manager crossed his arms, clearly unimpressed. "Yes, I'm sure," he said, his voice dripping with impatience. "I've been in this business for years, and I can spot a serious buyer from a mile away. And you, sir, don't look like one." The man didn't flinch. He simply studied the manager for a moment, his gaze calm but piercing. The tension in the air was thick. Employees exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what would happen next. One of the salesmen, a younger guy who had been watching from a distance, hesitated before stepping forward. He had a sinking feeling in his gut, the kind you get when you realize something is about to go terribly wrong. He had recognized the man almost instantly, but by the time he had worked up the courage to say something, the situation had already spiraled. The man exhaled slowly and turned his attention to the sleek silver sports car beside him. He ran a hand along its smooth surface, admiring the craftsmanship. "This one's nice," he said, almost to himself. "Good engine, solid build." The manager scoffed. "You wouldn't know. A car like that costs more than most people make in a year. It's not for just anyone." His tone was sharp, almost mocking. "Now, if you don't mind, I have actual customers to attend to." A quiet chuckle escaped the man's lips. Not one of amusement, but of understanding. He had seen this kind of attitude before. Judgment based on appearance, assumptions made without a second thought. It wasn't new to him. Just then, the glass doors of the dealership swung open, and a man in a sharp navy suit hurried in. His eyes scanned the room, and the moment he spotted the mysterious man, his expression changed completely. "Sir," he called out, his voice a mix of surprise and urgency. The employees turned in confusion. The manager frowned. The man in the black jacket finally smiled, but it wasn't smug. It was the kind of smile that came from knowing exactly how this moment was about to unfold. The wind howled through the narrow streets, whipping up a storm of dust as shadows crept along the cobbled ground. Beneath the crumbling archway of an old, abandoned church, Ava stood, her breath shallow, her heart racing. She'd come here seeking answers, but all she found was more questions and more danger. Behind her, the dark figure she'd been trying to escape for days was getting closer, its footsteps echoing in the silence. A sense of urgency gripped her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking right into a trap. The whispers she'd overheard at the tavern about the strange events that had been unfolding, things she hadn't been able to explain, were starting to piece together in her mind, but the answers only led to deeper, darker mysteries. Just as Ava stepped into the main hall of the church, the air seemed to thicken. The old building creaked and groaned under the pressure of unseen forces, and she glanced around nervously. The once beautiful stained glass windows, now shattered, cast eerie fragments of colored light across the stone floor, making everything feel even more surreal. In a corner of the room, something moved, slow, deliberate, like it was waiting for her. Ava froze, her instincts screaming at her to run, but her feet were rooted to the spot. The figure that had been following her emerged from the shadows. His face was hidden in the folds of a tattered cloak, but his presence was undeniable. He was the one who had been leaving the cryptic messages, the one who seemed to know more about her past than she did. "You've finally come," his voice echoed in the hollow space, unsettling in its calmness. "It's not safe here, Ava. They're already watching." She swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. "Who's watching? And what do you want from me?" The figure tilted his head, almost like he was assessing her, before taking a step closer. "I don't want anything from you, but you have something they need. Something they'll do anything to get their hands on." Ava's stomach churned. She'd been running for days, trying to escape from whoever these people were. Now she was stuck in a church with a man who seemed to know more about her than anyone else. She could feel the weight of his words sinking in. They need something from her asterisk. Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed from the other side of the church. Ava's heart skipped a beat as another figure appeared, this one taller, more imposing. His eyes were sharp, focused, and unlike the man in the cloak, his intentions were clear. He wasn't here to talk. The cloaked figure stepped in front of her, raising a hand in warning. "This is not your fight, Finn. Step aside." Finn, the newcomer, smirked. "I don't think she gets to choose, do you?" He looked at Ava, his eyes briefly softening, but there was a coldness to his voice when he spoke again. "You don't know who you're dealing with. You're in deeper than you realize." Ava felt a rising tide of panic. She had no idea who these people were, what they wanted, or what had brought them to her doorstep. The weight of it all pressed down on her, suffocating her thoughts. "I don't want to be part of this," she said, her voice shaking despite her attempt at strength. "I just want to know the truth." Finn's smirk faded, and he stepped closer, his eyes scanning her face like he was trying to gauge something important. "Truth," he echoed. "You're not ready for the truth, Ava. But you will be. Soon enough." The cloaked figure turned toward him sharply. "Enough, Finn. This is not the time." But Ava wasn't listening. Her mind was spinning. What had he meant by soon enough? What truth was she supposed to uncover? The more she thought about it, the more her instincts screamed at her that whatever she was about to learn would change everything, if she survived long enough to learn it. Suddenly, a distant sound, a faint but unmistakable noise, reached her ears. A low hum, like the vibration of an engine. Something was coming, and it wasn't good. Finn's eyes widened. "They're here," he muttered under his breath. His hands went to his belt, where a dagger rested, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he turned back to Ava. "We need to leave. Now." Ava didn't need any further encouragement. She turned on her heels, racing toward the door. The cloaked figure stayed behind, his silhouette already disappearing into the darkness, his warning hanging in the air like a haunting melody. "They'll find you, Ava. It's only a matter of time." As she sprinted through the church's crumbling hallways, Ava's thoughts were a blur. She had to find out what was happening, but with every step, the danger grew. And the truth was slipping further and further away, just beyond her reach. Somewhere in the distance, the hum grew louder, and the darkness crept closer. Meanwhile, across the city, a figure watched from a distance. His hand rested on a weathered map, his gaze fixed on the church's location. He had been tracking Ava for weeks, but something was different now. The time for subtlety was over. Whatever she had found, whatever had drawn her into this tangled web, was going to be the key to everything. And he wasn't about to let her slip away. Not now. Ava's heart pounded as she dashed through the darkened hallways of the church. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Too fast, too close. She knew Finn was right. They were coming. Whoever they were close, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. She could feel the air grow thicker, more suffocating with each passing second. Her breath hitched as she turned a corner, slipping in the dirt and debris that littered the floor. She couldn't slow down. Not now. The hum in the distance was growing louder, vibrating through her chest like a pulse. It felt like the very ground beneath her was alive, trembling with the weight of something enormous. The deeper she ran, the less she recognized the path. The familiar old stones of the church turned into unfamiliar twists, and the air seemed to distort around her. She was no longer sure if she was even still in the same place. It felt as though she had crossed into another world, one that was watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. Suddenly, the world went quiet. The hum was gone. The footsteps had stopped. Ava froze, every instinct telling her to run, but something inside her told her this was it, the moment everything changed. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming, but she couldn't turn back. Behind her, she heard the faintest rustle, and then the familiar voice of the cloaked figure, colder now, more urgent. Ava, you have to listen to me. They found us. We don't have time to argue. Her mind spun. She couldn't process the words fast enough. Asterisk found us. Asterisk, but she hadn't seen anyone else. Not until now. She turned sharply, meeting his gaze in the dim light. His face was tense, his eyes sharp with fear. It was the first time she had seen him so vulnerable. You knew this was coming, didn't you? Ava whispered, her voice trembling despite her attempt to stay steady. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes scanned the shadows, as though waiting for something to appear. I didn't know it would be this asterisk bad. But they've been tracking you, Ava. Tracking your every move. Every breath you take. She felt the weight of his words sink in. She thought she was running from shadows, but they had been following her, closing in on her from the very beginning. The truth she'd been searching for was closer than ever, but it was also more dangerous. Just then, the ground beneath them rumbled, a low, deep vibration that seemed to resonate through her bones. Ava gasped, stumbling back. It wasn't just the hum she had heard before. This was something far more intense, something that felt like it was tearing apart the fabric of the world around her. The cloaked figure's face went pale. It's starting. You need to leave, now. But Ava wasn't listening. Something in her, the pull of the truth, the pull of the danger, kept her rooted in place. Asterisk, what were they starting? Asterisk, what was happening? What was she supposed to do? Before she could speak, a blinding light burst from the floor beneath her, illuminating the entire space. Ava raised her arms instinctively to shield her eyes. The air crackled with static, the sound of something ancient and powerful awakening. And then, as quickly as it had come, the light vanished, leaving only darkness behind. But it wasn't empty darkness. In the shadows, figures began to materialize. Tall, indistinct shapes that seemed to flicker in and out of reality, like ghosts or memories. Their eyes glowed with a sickly, unnatural light. Hava felt a chill run down her spine. These weren't ordinary people. These were something else, something otherworldly. Do not resist, a voice boomed from the darkness. It wasn't the cloaked figure, nor Finn, but something deeper, something older. The voice filled the room, vibrating in her chest, making her bones ache. The time has come. You cannot hide anymore. Ava's pulse raced. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to move. She wanted to scream, but the air around her seemed to swallow her voice. The figures drew closer, their glowing eyes fixed on her like prey. In a split second, she turned, searching desperately for an escape. There, an opening in the far wall. She could make it. She could get out. But as she moved toward it, something cold, like a hand made of ice, grasped her arm. The cloaked figure's grip was iron-tight, his face a mask of fear and regret. "Don't go, Ava," he said, his voice strained. "You don't understand. They'll take you. They'll." A sudden explosion of light and sound shook the ground beneath her. Ava stumbled, caught between the darkness and the bright, searing flash. The cloaked figure was thrown back, and for a moment she was alone, the figures now closing in on her. Their voices a low hum that filled her ears. A scream tore from her throat as she realized they were reaching for her, their hands stretching, clawing at the air. Ava's heart raced as she sprinted toward the opening, but as she did, she saw something in the distance. Finn, standing in the middle of the chaos, his eyes wide with terror. "Run," he yelled, but his voice was drowned out by the deafening noise of the shifting shadows. Ava couldn't stop, couldn't think. She just ran, the world around her falling apart piece by piece. But even as she moved, the realization hit her. She wasn't running asterisk from asterisk something. She was running asterisk toward asterisk it. Whatever the truth was, it wasn't something she could escape. It was something she was meant to face. And it was waiting for her. Ava's breath came in ragged gasps as she barreled toward the open doorway. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist around her, almost as if they were alive, reaching for her, trying to pull her back into the chaos. She could hear Finn shouting, but his words were drowned in the roar of the darkness that surged behind her. The figures with glowing eyes were closing in, their presence suffocating, oppressive. She had to get out. She had to escape. Her foot slammed against the threshold of the doorway, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The darkness, the light, the figures, all of it hung in suspended animation as she crossed the line. And then, in a split second, the world exploded. The ground beneath her buckled, and Ava was thrown backward, her body slamming into the cold stone wall of the church. She gasped, struggling to breathe as the air around her warped, shifting in ways she couldn't understand. The figures had stopped. The world had stopped. And in the heavy silence that followed, she realized something was horribly wrong. Through the ringing in her ears, a voice pierced the air, a voice she'd never expected to hear. Ava. She turned, her heart lurching in her chest as she saw him. It was Finn, but he wasn't the same. His eyes, once full of fear and urgency, now gleamed with something darker, something more calculating. And as he stepped forward, the air seemed to change, charged with a strange energy. "Finn," she breathed, confusion and terror flooding her veins. This wasn't the Finn she had known. The one who had helped her, the one who had urged her to run. This was someone else. He smiled, but it wasn't the same smile. There was no warmth in it. "Did you really think you could outrun it?" he asked, his voice low, cold. "You were never meant to escape, Ava. This has all been part of the plan." Ava stumbled back, her mind scrambling to make sense of what he was saying. The world around her seemed to close in, the walls pressing tighter and tighter, as though the entire church were collapsing in on itself. Asterisk part of the plan, asterisk what plan? And why was Finn? You don't remember, do you? Finn continued, his gaze fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. You were never just a pawn, Ava. You were always the key. The words hit her like a punch to the gut, and she felt her knees go weak. The key, she whispered. What are you talking about? Finn's smile deepened, almost as if he was enjoying the confusion on her face. You're the one they've been waiting for. You're the one they've been preparing for. All of it, the messages, the shadows, the whispers, it was all leading to this moment. Ava's pulse quickened. Asterisk, they've been preparing me for something. Asterisk, her thoughts spun wildly. And for the first time since all this had started, she felt truly lost, adrift in a sea of unknowns. But why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why me?